growing cannabis. He's campaigning for the right to cultivate and smoke as much as he wants to. That's led to 2 jail sentences, but lately the judges have been more lenient. So, is Neil Morgan winning? And should he be winning? Matthew Blythe reports.
Cultivation of cannabis is rife in Wales. This man says there's a secret network of thousands of growers. Tonight he takes Wales This Week behind the scenes of one of our biggest cottage industries.
3,000 growers in Wales. Minimum 3,000 growers. Well, I say we are producing half the cannabis in the UK. Growers produce half the cannabis in the UK. And it's almost like a massive club.
But he's no ordinary member. He grows for himself to challenge the law through the courts. He gets busted to argue his case in front of a judge. The basis of his legal argument is Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. It addresses the right of every citizen to have a private life.
Article 8 is the right to private life. There shall be no interference by public authority in the exercise of this right, in accordance with the law, as is necessary in the law, unless you break these certain principles of the rights and freedoms of others. Now, I have not interfered with the rights and freedoms of others, so I cannot therefore be in contravention of Article 8. Therefore, the NDA 1971 cannot go through my defence. They cannot haul me in because I haven't done anything, I haven't breached that wall, that defence, if you like.
But Article 8 can be curtailed according to the law, so Neil Morgan's private life has earned him a long criminal record. Over 35 years he's been busted 15 times, fined on numerous occasions, jailed twice. When he's not tending to his plants, he's researching the law to reinforce his legal arguments, which he puts to the court. We told MP Paul Flynn about Neil Morgan's campaign.
Some reforms in our country have come from brave people who challenge the existing laws. I mean, I think it's dangerous from his point of view. He's likely to suffer with a prison sentence, which is not a pleasant experience. But he sees that as a way of challenging the law.
In 2006, Neil Morgan was challenging the law in a couple of caravans in some woods in West Wales near Newcastle Emlyn. He was using the same site to break caravans for scrap metal.
In the front I've got the caravans I'm breaking, right? And round the back, away from all the nonsense, I've got my little caravan and the 2 little grow caravans that I've got. That's in the photographs here. And that's it. So the generators supply the electric for everything I need. The tools I need, all the equipment that's rechargeable and so on. And that's how it worked.
How many plants were you growing?
101. That's the problem, 101 plants is too many.
Dyfed-Powys police visited the woods and asked Neil Morgan who owned the caravans. He said he did, and they asked what's inside. He said weed, and they asked him what he meant, and he said cannabis. When they told him that he was under arrest, he said, "It is my right to a private life under Article 8.
I mean, if I said when they arrested me I was having a drink and having a smoke, you can interpret that, well, I've got a pint of beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, yeah? No, I've got a cup of coffee in one hand and a joint in the other. That creates the problem. I was literally sitting in my caravan minding my own business, completely on my own. Another human being half a mile away. Absolute isolation. I got half a dozen old plod in Wellington boots. Knock on the door. End of trip.
Neil Morgan's legal argument has a second string. On the one hand, there is legislation to protect citizens from harmful substances. But on the other, governments allow alcohol and tobacco to be used responsibly. Neil Morgan argues that if he can take one harmful substance responsibly, why can't he take another? Last year, a project by Cardiff and Bristol universities collated all the research from around the world on cannabis and psychosis. We asked Professor Glyn Lewis for their findings.
Our conclusion is that we can't be certain that there is a causal link between cannabis and schizophrenia. There is a very consistent association between cannabis use and later development of schizophrenia, but we think part of that association results from the fact that cannabis users are different from people who don't use cannabis. So we can't really be certain about the link. But we do think there's now sufficient evidence that people should be warned about the possible link.
And at the same time as the medical case was growing against cannabis, the police were stepping up their crackdown on illegal cannabis growers.
The issue that we're looking at here is serious and organised crime. These aren't benefactor, good-willed people creating a crop for light users of cannabis. This is a very concentrated cannabis which has a high content of what's called THC, which is the key element in there. So it's a very strong drug that is being produced. But it's the associated criminality that these people bring with them. As I said, the exploitation of migrant workers, but it's also the money laundering and the violence that they bring with them that is a key aspect that means that we will tackle this criminality.
Neil Morgan is not involved in that kind of cannabis production, but when he came to be sentenced, he was sure another spell in jail was inevitable. We spoke to him a week before sentencing.
Production, I could get up to 2 years on this one. If I'm convicted again, third time production was a mandatory 7 years. And that's it, which is probably longer than you get for killing someone, isn't it, really? Just about.
But at Swansea Crown Court, the dope grower was surprised when Judge Thomas handed down a 12-month suspended prison sentence and placed him on an 18-month probation supervision order. Judge Thomas said,
"I see no purpose at this stage in your life, you being 52 years of age, in sending you to prison. But if you do not obey the order that I'm going to make, then that is what will have to happen."
Maybe common sense prevailed. Perhaps people are starting to see that it's not necessary to destroy people's lives for absolutely no reason at all.
Neil Morgan returned to his home in Abercrave in the Swansea Valley and continued growing cannabis. He was arrested again in July 2007, this time with 148 plants. He was bailed and planted some more. Then in December he was arrested again with 104 plants. At his conviction at Cardiff Crown Court, his probation report recommended a prison sentence. But Judge Philip Richards deferred sentencing for 6 months to give Neil Morgan a chance to clean up his act. Then in March this year, a second probation report stated he had stopped growing. Judge Richards said,
"I might consider imposing upon you a requirement to carry out unpaid work for 150 hours, because you have been good to your word, and I hope you will continue being good to your word in relation to cannabis."
Dyfed-Powys Police and the Crown Prosecution Service would not comment on the non-custodial sentence, but Paul Flynn MP backs the judge.
The law is an ass because the most futile thing to do with drug users, whether they're using cannabis or heroin or alcohol, is to send them to jail. It's hugely expensive and it doesn't do any good.
Paul Flynn is working at a European level to introduce legislation to encourage member countries to reallocate anti-drug resources from the criminal to the health treatment of drug users.
That will happen because this was passed unanimously by the Council of Europe. There are 48 countries involved that are supporting this, and it'll now get the backing of the Pompidou Group, and there's progress there. It will be much easier to progress when you've got nations working together.
But in Britain, health fears have led to the reclassification from Class C to Class B. Paul Flynn says exaggerated claims do not help educate young people. Professor Glyn Lewis says there was a misinterpretation of his findings. He explained the likelihood of psychosis.
For example, the risks of psychosis or schizophrenia are probably in the order of about 1 to 2% in someone's lifetime. So if a regular use of cannabis doubled that risk, that still means only perhaps 4% or so would develop schizophrenia if it is a causal relationship. So that means 96% of people, if you like, could use cannabis without any risk of this psychotic illness developing.